June 6th, 1944. The dim glow of a single desk lamp pierces the fog of cigarette smoke in a cramped underground bunker beneath Whitehall, London. You can almost feel the damp chill seeping through the concrete walls, the distant rumble of air raid sirens, a faint echo from the streets above. Colonel David Strangeways, his uniform rumpled from days without sleep, hunches over a map table cluttered with pins, photographs and scribbled notes. His fingers, stained with ink, trace the jagged coastline of Normandy, France, those cliffs and beaches that have haunted Allied planners for months. Strangeways pauses, rubbing his eyes, and glances at the man across from him. Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan, the chief planner for the invasion. Morgan's face is etched with the weight of secrecy, his voice a low murmur as he speaks. "David, if this works, it'll be the greatest deception in history. But if it fails..." He trails off, letting the unspoken dread hang in the air like the acrid scent of burning tobacco. Outside, the Thames whispers against its embankments, but down here, in the heart of Operation Bodyguard, the real current surges through classified documents and whispered strategies. This isn't just another war room, it's the nerve center where illusion will be forged into reality. Strangeways nods, his mind racing back to how it all began, not with grand pronouncements, but with a desperate gamble born from fear. It was over a year earlier, in the sweltering summer of 1943, when the seeds of doubt were first planted in Adolf Hitler's ironclad confidence. Picture the Führer's Wolf's Lair, that fortified enclave deep in the Prussian forests, where pine needles crunch under the boots of SS guards patrolling the perimeter. Hitler, pacing the wooden floors of his conference room, his mustache twitching with agitation, slams a fist on the oak table. "The Allies will strike at Calais!" he bellows, his blue eyes blazing. Around him a cadre of generals, Jodl, Keitel, Rommel, exchange uneasy glances, but none dare contradict the man who has reshaped Europe in his image. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox himself, stands rigidly in his grey uniform, the Iron Cross glinting on his chest. Fresh from the sands of North Africa, where defeat still stings like salt in a wound, Rommel has been tasked with fortifying the Atlantic Wall. He's seen the Allied might firsthand, the endless convoys, the thunder of bombers blotting out the sun. In private moments, away from Hitler's rants, Rommel confides in his aides, the invasion will come soon, and it won't be where he thinks. But voicing that to the Führer, it's like challenging the tide. Rommel's warning starts small, almost casual, during a briefing in the humid air of the Wolf's Lair. The room smells of polished leather and stale coffee, maps of Western Europe unfurled like battle scars across the table. "Mein Führer," Rommel begins, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Our intelligence suggests the English and Americans are massing troops in the southeast of England, facing Calais. But we must consider diversions. They've used them before, in Sicily with Patton's Ghost Army." He gestures to a report from Abwehr spies detailing phantom movements across the channel. Hitler waves it off, his hand cutting through the air like a knife. "Nonsense, Erwin. The shortest route is the obvious one. Eisenhower wouldn't waste time on tricks." Laughter ripples from Keitel, but it's forced, a brittle sound that doesn't reach their eyes. Rommel bites his tongue, knowing the cost of dissent. He's already clashed with the high command over resources, begging for more panzers, more concrete for the beaches. Yet Hitler, ensconced in his worldview, clings to the belief that the Allies lack the audacity for anything but the direct path. As the months drag on, the warnings multiply, each one a pebble in the avalanche building against Hitler's certainty. By late 1943, in the echoing halls of the OKW headquarters in Berlin, General Alfred Jodl pores over intercepted radio chatter. The building's marble floors echo with the click of heels from hurried staff officers, the air heavy with the scent of wax polish and desperation. Jodl, his face gaunt under the harsh fluorescent lights, calls in Colonel Alexis Baron von Roene, the head of Fremde Heer West, the intelligence unit tracking Allied forces. "Alexis, Jodl says, sliding a dossier across the desk. What do you make of this? Reports of an entire army group under Patton in Kent. Tanks, aircraft, the works. But our agents say it's inflated. Von Roener adjusts his spectacles, his brow furrowing as he scans the pages. Double agents, codenamed Garbo and Brutus, feeding back tales of elaborate preparations for an assault on the Pas de Calais. It's deception, Herr General, von Roener replies, his tone measured. The numbers don't add up. They're creating phantoms to draw our eyes away from Normandy. Jodl leans back, steepling his fingers. He's no fool. He's orchestrated deceptions himself. But Hitler, the Führer, has grown paranoid, his trust in intelligence eroded by past betrayals, like the surprise in Sicily. If I tell him it's a ruse, Jodl mutters, he'll accuse me of defeatism. Remember what happened to Canaris? The Admiral's fall from grace still looms, a cautionary tale of spies and suspicions. Von Roener nods grimly, the weight of it settling like dust in the room. Word filters up, of course. In a side room during a strategy session, Rommel pulls aside General Hans Speidel, his chief of staff, the two men speaking in hushed tones amid stacks of blueprints for beach obstacles. Hans, the Führer is blind to it, Rommel whispers, his voice barely audible over the hum of a distant generator. He's convinced the main blow falls at Calais because that's what his intuition tells him. But our reconnaissance shows unusual activity further west, Normandy ports, quiet until now. Speidel, a sharp-eyed Prussian, scribbles notes on a pad, his pen scratching like claws on wood. We must press him, Herr Feldmarschall, if we reinforce the wrong sector, but pressing Hitler is like wrestling a shadow. At Rastenburg, during a midnight conference, the air thick with the Führer's monologues on wonder weapons and unbreakable will, Rommel tries again. The Allies have formed the first United States Army group, FUSAG, right across from us here. He points to the map, his finger jabbing at Dover. Patton's commanding it. That's no feint, it's a hammer. Hitler, pacing with that peculiar hitch in his step, stops and stares. For a moment doubt flickers in his eyes, but then it's gone, replaced by fervor. Exactly. They'll come straight at us. I've always said it. Your worries are overcautious, Erwin. And the generals file out, frustration simmering beneath their salutes. In the corridor, shadowed by swastika banners, Keitel mutters to Jodl. He won't listen. It's as if he's willing the invasion to happen where he wants it. Jodl nods, the corridor's chill mirroring the ice in his veins. They know the stakes. Divisions misplaced, beaches undefended, yet Hitler's faith in his own genius and the bait dangled by Allied spies binds them like chains. Back in London, as Strangeways and Morgan refine their script, the deception takes shape. Dummy tanks inflate under the cover of night in Kent fields, their canvas hides rustling in the wind like conspirators. Radio operators mimic the chatter of a massive force, their Morse code pulsing across the waves. You can imagine the tension in those control rooms, the flicker of valves in transmitters, the operators' sweat-slicked brows as they weave the web. By early 1944, the fake armies swell in Hitler's mind. FUSAG, a colossus of 50 divisions poised to strike. Rommel's pleas for mobility fall on deaf ears. Resources pour into Calais fortifications, leaving Normandy a fragile veil. The warnings, once whispers, become shouts in classified memos, but Hitler dismisses them as enemy propaganda, his generals' reluctance to push harder sealing the illusion. As D-Day looms, the air in Whitehall grows electric, Strangeways pinning the final markers. The fake armies aren't just on paper, they're alive in the Führer's nightmares, pulling his gaze from the true storm gathering across the Channel. And in that misdirection, the Allies' greatest hope takes root. The fog clings to the English countryside like a shroud as dawn breaks over the rolling fields of southeast Kent, late January 1944. You can taste the salt in the air from the nearby Channel, mingling with the earthy dampness of ploughed soil still frozen from the night's frost. In a secluded barn on the outskirts of Dover, a team of Royal Engineers works by the flicker of hurricane lanterns, their breath visible in the chill. Sergeant Tom Wilkins, his hands chapped and raw from the cold, kneels beside a hulking shape half covered in tarpaulin. "Careful now, lads," he mutters, his Cockney accent thick with exhaustion. "One wrong puff, and this beast deflates like a punctured lung." The beast is no Sherman tank, but an inflatable facsimile, its rubber skin slowly swelling under the hiss of compressed air from a bicycle pump jury-rigged to a lorry engine. Across the field, more dummies take form. Canvas lorries, wooden gun emplacements disguised with netting and straw. This is the birth of Fusag's Phantom Fleet, part of Operation Fortitude South, the linchpin of the grand illusion. Wilkins wipes sweat from his brow despite the cold, glancing at the horizon where the real sea meets the sky. Somewhere out there, German E-boats prowl. But here, in the heart of the deception, silence is the enemy they fear most. Word of these spectral forces ripples across the channel, carried by the double agents woven into the Abwehr's web. In a nondescript flat in Madrid, Juan Pujol Garcia, codename Garbo to the Allies, Arabelle to the Germans, huddles over a typewriter in the dim light of a single bulb. The room smells of ink and cigarette ash, the clack of keys echoing like Morse code in the night. Garbo, a Catalan with a flair for the dramatic, types furiously, fabricating reports of troop build-ups, divisions marching into Kent, Patton's fiery speeches rallying GIs under rainy skies. "The Americans are impatient," he writes in his coded message, demanding action at Pas-de-Calais before spring thaws the ports. He seals the envelope, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from the thrill of pulling the strings that could unravel an empire. By February, these dispatches land on desks in Berlin's Türpitzufer, the Abwehr headquarters, where the air hangs heavy with the scent of oiled typewriters and hurried feet on linoleum floors. Colonel Hans Oster, a quiet dissenter within the intelligence apparatus, scans the latest from Garbo. His office, cluttered with file cabinets and a half-empty coffee mug, feels like a confessional in the gathering storm. Oster has long suspected the Führer's inner circle of blindness, but he summons Major Wilhelm Kuehn, a field analyst with sharp features and a perpetual squint from poring over maps. "Wilhelm, look at this," Oster says, sliding the decrypt across the scarred wooden desk. "Garbo's reliable. Landed us Sicily's invasion blindside, remember? He swears Fusag is real. 100,000 men, 20 divisions, Patton at the helm. But cross-reference with aerial recon, our Ju-88s over Kent show activity, yet the numbers, they blur." Kuehn adjusts his tie, the fabric stiff with starch, and leans in. The report details fake radio traffic, overheard by Luftwaffe listeners. Coded orders for amphibious rehearsals, supply dumps swelling like tumours along the Dover cliffs. "It's too perfect, Herr Oberst," Kuehn replies, his voice low. "Like theatre. What if it's to mask Normandy? Our sources there are thin, farmers whispering of gliders, but nothing concrete." Oster nods, the weight of it pressing on his chest like the Führer's unyielding gaze. He's no stranger to the risks. Whispers of a plot against Hitler swirl in these halls, but doubt binds them tighter than loyalty. "We flag it up," he decides, "but softly." Jodel's already walking on eggshells after the last briefing. They draft the memo, words chosen like mines in a field. Possible exaggeration in enemy dispositions. Recommend verification. It joins a stack bound for Rastenburg, where the wolf's lair broods under snow-laced pines. In the Führer's bunker, the fire crackles in the hearth, casting long shadows across the conference table laden with situation maps. It's mid-February, and Adolf Hitler, bundled in a greatcoat against the draft, pores over the intelligence summary. His hands, trembling slightly from fatigue or fury, trace the lines from Dover to Calais. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the elderly commander of OB West, stands at attention, his monocle glinting like ice. Rundstedt's face, lined from years of service, betrays no emotion, but his mind races. He's urged redistribution, more panzers to the Normandy sector where beaches lie vulnerably open, but Hitler fixates on the east. "See here," Hitler declares, his voice rising, jabbing at the map with a pencil. "Fusag, Patton's army, ready to pounce. Garbo confirms it. Troops pouring in, landing craft by the hundred." The room, warmed by a potbelly stove, yet chilled by tension, holds generals like statues. Rommel absent, inspecting the wall, Keitel nodding obsequiously, Jodl silent, his eyes flicking to the memo from Oster. Von Rundstedt clears his throat, the sound like gravel under boots. "Mein Führer, our analysts note discrepancies. The scale seems orchestrated, perhaps a diversion to split our forces." Hitler whirls, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Diversion? From what, Gerhard? The moon? No, this is the thrust, the shortest path as I've always known. Your caution is the real enemy." Von Rundstedt stiffens, saluting crisply, but inside, resignation coils like smoke. He's warned before in the sterile corridors of Zossen, pulling aside staff officers amid the clatter of teletype machines. "The Führer sees what he wills," he'd confided to an aide, the words bitter on his tongue. Now he retreats to his quarters, the bunker's concrete echoing his footsteps, drafting yet another plea for mobile reserves, ignored, as always. Across the Reich, the doubts fester. In Paris, at the Hotel Majestic, where the German High Command oversees occupation, General Karl Heinrich von Stülpnagel pores over intercepted signals in a chandelier-lit office reeking of cognac and defeat. The windows rattle from distant Allied bombers, a reminder of the skies they no longer own. Stülpnagel, part of the resistance web, meets secretly with Rommel's emissaries. Irwin's reports from the coast, "Normandy's defenses are paper-thin," he whispers over a map unrolled on a Persian rug. But Hitler pours everything into Calais. 15th Army entrenched, V1 sights buzzing. Our own intel screams faint, yet he trusts these Spanish phantoms more than us. Rommel, back at La Roche-Guyon in April, his chateau headquarters alive with the buzz of aides and the scent of blooming orchards, receives the latest. He paces the gravel courtyard, boots crunching, as Speidel hands him a Luftwaffe photo. Dummy airfields in East Anglia, gliders that vanish on second pass. "Hans, it's a masterpiece," Rommel says, his voice laced with reluctant admiration. But the Führer won't see it. Last week, he ranted for hours on Patton's impatience, as if the man exists only in his dispatches. Speidel, sketching fortifications on a notepad, replies, "We've begged for authority to reposition. Just 48 hours after landing, denied. He's chained to Calais like a dog to its post." The illusions deepen. Fake pipelines snaking across Kent meadows, their wooden struts groaning under simulated pressure. Wireless vans prowling country lanes, broadcasting the hum of a non-existent armada. In London, at the Deception Hub in Norfolk House, Lieutenant Colonel John Bevan orchestrates it all, his pipe smoke curling like secrets in the wood-panelled room. "Garbo's bought it hook, line and sinker," he tells his team, maps pinned with coloured threads. Hitler's feeding off the bait. Divisions shifting east, our boys in Normandy breathe easier. Yet in the wolf's lair, as spring rains patter on the roof, Hitler convenes another council. The air tastes of damp wool and resolve. "The invasion comes at Calais," he insists, pounding the table. Generals murmur assent, their warnings swallowed by the roar of his certainty. Von Roener's final assessment, Fusaga Mirage, sits unread in a drawer, the general's refusal to force the issue a silent complicity. The fake armies march in Hitler's mind, a colossal shadow pulling the Reich's gaze from the gathering tempest in the west. And as the calendar flips toward June, the noose tightens, unseen. May 15th, 1944. The salty tang of the English Channel bites at the air as you stand on the windswept bluffs near Folkestone, where whitecaps churn against the chalk cliffs like restless ghosts. Below, in a concealed cove, a flotilla of dummy landing craft bobs on the tide. Plywood hulls painted drab grey, their decks cluttered with fake crates and coiled ropes that flap in the gusts. Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming, borrowed from naval intelligence for this charade, adjusts his binoculars, the leather strap creaking against his uniform. His face, sharp and intense under the brim of his cap, scans the horizon where a lone German reconnaissance plane might appear at any moment. "Keep the wireless going," he orders his signals team, huddled in a camouflaged truck that hums with the low thrum of generators. "Make it sound like the whole bloody invasion's about to launch." The transmissions crackle out. Urgent dispatches about weather delays for the Pas-de-Calais assault, Patton's troops chafing at the bit in their Kent barracks. Fleming smirks faintly, knowing these signals will hook into the German listening posts along the French coast, where Luftwaffe operators scribble feverishly in bunkers reeking of diesel and sweat. This is Operation Fortitude in full swing. The fake armies, now a living, breathing spectre, complete with staged troop movements visible from the air, soldiers marching in circles to kick up dust clouds that mimic divisions on the move. You can hear the distant rumble of those tanks, actually modified tractors dragging logs, trailing plumes of smoke from hidden flares. Across the water, in the fortified sprawl of the Atlantic Wall near Calais, Oberleutnant Karl Becker wipes fog from his periscope in a concrete pillbox overlooking the dunes. The air inside is stale, laced with the metallic bite of gun oil and the faint rot of seaweed washed up by high tide. Becker, a veteran of the Eastern Front with scars puckering his cheek, peers at the empty sea, his ears straining for the Allied armada his superiors swear is coming. "Nothing but waves," he mutters to his gunner, Private Heinz Müller, who polishes a MG-42 machine gun with rhythmic strokes. But the orders from above are clear. The 15th Army digs in deeper, flak batteries swiveling skyward, minefields sprouting like deadly weeds along the beaches. Becker's received the latest intel brief, Fusag's might swelling to absurd proportions, and though doubt gnaws at him, he salutes the chain of command, the concrete walls closing in like a tomb. In Berlin's cavernous chancellery, the midday sun filters through blackout curtains, casting striped shadows across the marble floors where echoes of polished boots resound. Adolf Hitler, his uniform hanging looser on his frame from the strain of command, convenes an urgent session with his inner circle. The room smells of fresh varnish from newly hung portraits and the sharp ozone of an electric fan whirring against the spring warmth. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel enters last, his face tanned and drawn from weeks inspecting the coast, the dust of Normandy roads still clinging to his boots. He carries a leather portfolio bulging with photographs and reports, his aide, Captain Helmuth Lang, trailing like a shadow. "Mein Führer," Rommel begins without preamble, spreading grainy aerial shots across the long oak table, images of bustling ports in southern England, ships that seem to multiply overnight. These confirm the build-up, but look closer. The patterns repeat, like actors on a stage. Our agents report Patton's outbursts, demands for immediate action at Calais, yet reconnaissance shows supply lines stretched thin westward. Normandy's the blind spot, beaches half fortified, reserves committed here. He taps the Pas-de-Calais sector emphatically, his voice gaining edge, the iron cross at his throat catching the light. Hitler leans forward, his eyes feverish behind wire-rimmed glasses, fingers drumming a staccato on the table's edge. Generals Wilhelm Keitel and Alfred Jodl flank him, their postures rigid, the air thick with the scent of Hitler's aftershave mingling with their cologne. "Erwin, your vigilance is admirable," Hitler replies, his tone paternal yet laced with steel. But intuition doesn't lie. The Allies crave the quick kill. Calais is the dagger's point. Garbo's reports align perfectly. Divisions mobilizing, Eisenhower holding Patton's leash. We've trapped them in their own logic. He gestures dismissively at a stack of intercepts, the paper rustling like dry leaves. Rommel exchanges a glance with Jodl, whose face remains impassive, though his knuckles whiten on his chair arms. Jodl has seen the conflicting analyses from Fremde Heere West. Von Roener's latest memo, buried under approvals, warning of artificial inflation in enemy numbers, citing discrepancies in radio traffic that echo too neatly like scripted dialogue. In a sidebar meeting the night before, in the Chancellery's dimly lit library, where leather-bound volumes loomed like silent judges, Jodl had confided to Keitel over brandy that burned the throat. "Alfred, if we don't countermand this fixation, Normandy falls undefended. Rommel's right, the feint's too elaborate for nothing." Keitel, ever the loyalist, had swirled his glass, the liquid catching firelight. "Speak out, and we're the next Canaris. The Führer smells treason in doubt." Now, as Rommel presses, pulling out a dog-eared map marked with red lines for proposed panzer redeployments, Hitler rises abruptly, his chair scraping harshly. "Enough. Your desert fox instincts serve you well in sand, but here, in the West, it's my vision that prevails. Fusag is real, 50 divisions, a tidal wave. We'll crush them at the water's edge." The words hang heavy, the fan's blades slicing the silence. Rommel salutes, jaw set. But as he exits into the corridor's cool draught, he mutters to Lang, "He's building castles in the air, and we're the fools shoring up the foundations." Word of the clash spreads like ripples in a pond. At La Roche-Guyon, Rommel's chateau headquarters, where ivy clings to ancient stone, and the air carries hints of lavender from the gardens, General Hans Speidel convenes a late-night huddle in the map room. Candlelight flickers over charts pinned to walls, the scratch of pencils mingling with the tick of a grandfather clock. Speidel, his uniform unbuttoned at the collar, paces before a cluster of staff officers, their faces illuminated like conspirators. "The warnings go unheeded," he says, voice low against the creak of floorboards. "Hitler's locked on Calais, 15th Army immobile, our panzers rusting in depots. Aerial photos from the west show gliders massing in Devon, not Dover. We draft another appeal, mobile reserves, immediate authority." Across the Reich, the doubts compound. In Lisbon, double agent Dusko Popov, codenamed Tricycle, sips ouzo in a smoky cafe overlooking the Tagus, the river's briny breeze wafting through open windows. Posing as a playboy spy, he feeds the Abwehr tales of Norwegian diversions, but his true reports to London amplify fortitude, phantom exercises off East Anglia, decoy convoys steaming south. "Hitler's swallowing it whole," Popov wires MI5, the code clicking out from a hidden transmitter in his villa's attic, where dust motes dance in the bulb's glow. By month's end, as thunderheads gather over the channel, the illusions peak. In Kent's muddy fields, engineers erect fake oil depots, balloons mimicking silos, their valves hissing steam to simulate pressure. Radio nets buzz with feigned panic over U-boat sightings, drawing German submarines away from Normandy. In the Wolf's Lair, Hitler pores over the deluge, his bunker alive with the clatter of typewriters and the sharp scent of pine disinfectant. Another briefing. Von Rundstedt, monocle flashing, urges caution. Discrepancies mount, mein Führer. Agent reports clash with photo intel. Hitler waves him off, eyes alight. "Trust the sources that serve us. The hammer falls at Calais." The generals retreat, their pleas echoing unanswered in the forest's hush. Rommel, driving back to the coast in his Hochstaff car, the engine growling over rutted roads, stares at the passing hedgerows. "If only he'd listen," he tells Speidel via radio, static crackling like breaking resolve. The fake armies swell in the shadows, Hitler's trust a blindfold tightening with each dismissed warning. June beckons, the true invasion a whisper beneath the roar of deception. June 1st, 1944. The first light of dawn filters through the narrow slit windows of Bletchley Park's Hut 3, deep in the Buckinghamshire countryside, where the air hums with the ceaseless whir of Enigma decrypts and the sharp scent of hot tea mingling with ozone from overheated machines. You lean over the shoulder of analyst Hugh Alexander, his shirt sleeves rolled up, exposing ink-smeared forearms as he transcribes the latest intercept from a German signal station near Boulogne. The paper crinkles under his fingers, revealing fragments of chatter about Fusag's imminent assault. echoes of the deceptions flooding the airwaves. "They're still buying it," Alexander murmurs to his colleague, Captain Jerry Morgan, whose glasses fog slightly from the steam of his mug. "Hitler's shifted another Panzer Division east. Normandy's wide open." Across the Channel, in the shadowed command post at Saint-Malo, France, where the Atlantic wall juts like jagged teeth against the grey sea, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stares out at the foaming breakers crashing on mined sands. The salt spray stings his face, carried on a wind that whips his greatcoat around his legs, the fabric snapping like a flag in surrender. It's been a grueling drive from Berlin, his staff car bouncing over bomb-cratered roads, but the urgency gnaws at him deeper than fatigue. Rommel turns to General Hans Speidel, who stands beside him, map case tucked under his arm, the leather worn from constant use. "Hans, the weather's turning, storms brewing. If they wait, our chance to reposition slips away." Speidel nods, his breath visible in the chill morning air, eyes scanning the horizon where low clouds promise delay. "The Führer's latest order. Hold the 15th Army firm at Calais. No movement without his nod." Rommel's fist clenches around the binoculars, the metal cold against his palm. He's just returned from another fruitless audience at the Wolf's Lair, where the pine-scented bunkers echoed with Hitler's tirades. Picture it, May 30th, the conference room thick with cigar smoke that curls like serpents around the Führer's head, his voice booming off the panelled walls as he gestures wildly at a massive wall map pinned with swastika flags. Generals Alfred Jodl and Wilhelm Keitel sit like sentinels, their uniforms crisp, but their faces betray the strain. Jodl's jaw tight, Keitel's eyes darting. Rommel had laid it out plainly, unrolling his own charts amid the clink of coffee cups and the distant bark of guard dogs. "Mein Führer, the deceptions are unraveling," he'd said, his tone edged with the desperation of a man staring at checkmate. Luftwaffe photos show inconsistencies, troop concentrations in Kent that vanish on repass. Von Röhner's team confirms, radio traffic's a farce, patterns too rhythmic, like a symphony played on repeat. "We must pull panzers west. Normandy's beaches are a sieve, obstacles half-placed, Luftwaffe patrols thinned to ghosts." Hitler had paused, his hand hovering over the Pas de Calais marker, the room falling silent save for the tick of a wall clock. For a heartbeat, doubt shadowed his features, the lines around his mouth deepening. Then he straightened, slamming his palm down with a thud that rattled the ashtrays. "Erwin, your fears are the Allies' greatest weapon. Fusag breathes down our necks, Patton's tanks revving, landing craft massing like locusts." Garbo's eyes are sharp, he sees the truth. Normandy, a sideshow, probes at best. "We'll meet the hammer with our full anvil here." Laughter erupted from Keitel, obsequious and hollow, but Jodl remained stone-faced, his mind flashing to the buried reports in his briefcase. Aerial mosaics from Ju 188s over southern England, revealing sparse, real activity amid the dummies, supply lines pointing west. In the anteroom afterward, amid stacks of teletypes humming like angry bees, Jodl had gripped Rommel's arm, his voice a whisper over the rustle of papers. "I pushed von Rundstedt to echo you. Discrepancies in agent traffic, numbers inflated like balloons, but he balks, fears the noose of treason." Now, back on the wind-swept coast, Rommel paces the concrete promenade, his boots echoing hollowly, the sea's roar drowning the cries of gulls wheeling overhead. Speidel unfolds a telegram from OB West headquarters in Paris, the paper fluttering in the breeze. Rundstedt's appeal denied again. He's cabling Berlin. Enemy deceptions confirmed by signal analysis. Fusag a phantom to fix our gaze. Recommend immediate reserve mobilization to Cotentin Peninsula. Rommel snorts, a bitter sound lost to the waves. "And Hitler will crumple it like the last 10. He's entranced by those Spanish lies. Garbo's fiction's more real to him than our eyes in the sky." They climb into the staff car, the engine coughing to life with a belch of exhaust, and rumble toward La Roche-Guyon, the chateau's spires piercing the mist like a mirage. In the Reich's intelligence nerve center at Zossen, south of Berlin, Colonel Alexis Baron von Roen hunches over a cluttered desk in his office, the air heavy with the musty odor of aging files and the acrid bite of his extinguished pipe. Flickering lamplight dances across intercepts piled like accusations. Double-agent dispatches, cross-referenced with RAF bombing reports, revealing the charade. Von Rohne, his spectacles perched on the bridge of his nose, summons his deputy, Major Otto Heilmann, whose uniform bears the dust of a recent flight from France. "Otto, the piece is fit," von Rohne says, sliding a graph across the blotter, spikes in fake radio emissions correlating with lulls in Normandy preparations. "Fusag's a house of cards. Inflatable tanks spotted by our FW-189s, vanishing on Zoom. Tricycle and Brutus corroborate the east, but it's theatre, diverting the 15th Army while real forces gather in the west. I've drafted the urgent bulletin, deception operation probable, reinforce Normandy forthwith." Heilmann leans in, the chair creaking under his weight, his fingers tracing the channel's curve on an adjacent map. "Herr Oberst, Jodel's seen it. He nodded during our last sync. But escalating to the Führer? Keitel's blocked 2 already, calling them speculative. Rommel's on the wire daily, begging for panzer autonomy." Von Rohne rubs his temples, the headache pulsing like distant artillery. He's risked much. Whispers of resistance circles, plots simmering in these very halls, but the general's timidity chains them. The bulletin goes out anyway, encoded and urgent, winging toward Rastenburg on the wings of a courier's motorcycle, tires humming over rain-slicked autobahns. At the wolf's lair, twilight drapes the forest in bruised purple, the bunker's generators thrumming like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Adolf Hitler, pacing the strategy room with that erratic gait, pores over the evening brief, the air thick with the tang of sauerkraut from a half-eaten plate. Keitel delivers von Rohen's warning, his voice steady but eyes averted, the words hanging amid the glow of shaded lamps. "Possible feint, mein Führer. Intelligence suggests diversionary intent." Hitler stops, whirling with a ferocity that silences the room, his face flushing crimson under the harsh light. "Feint? When Garbo screams invasion at Calais, when Patton's ghost army parades for our spies? No, this is the ploy within the ploy to make us doubt the obvious." He crumples the paper, tossing it into the fire where it curls and blackens, flames licking like vindication. Jodl, standing in the corner with arms crossed, feels the heat on his face but says nothing, the cost of contradiction etched in every dismissed memo. Outside, as aides scurry through the dripping pines, the wind carries the first rumbles of thunder, storms that will lash the channel for days, buying the Allies time. Rommel, miles away, receives the rejection via crackling radio in his chateau's library, the fire popping in the grate as he stares at the receiver. "Blind," he mutters to Speidel, the word heavy as lead. All our warnings, echoes in the void. The fake armies loom larger in the Reich's defences, Hitler's trust an unbreakable spell, even as the real armada assembles under cover of cloud and wave. D-Day whispers closer, the general's silence a final, fatal seal. June 5th, 1944. The relentless patter of rain drums against the leaded windows of SHAEF headquarters in Southwick House near Portsmouth, where the air inside hangs heavy with the brine of the nearby Solent and the faint, acrid whiff of wet wool from sodden uniforms. You can feel the floorboards creak under the weight of anxious footsteps as Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower paces the oak-paneled war room, his face shadowed by the green glow of shaded lamps, illuminating a vast wall map of Normandy's coast. Cigarette smoke curls lazily from his hand-rolled Lucky Strike, mingling with the steam rising from mugs of lukewarm coffee clutched by aides like lifelines. Outside, the storm howls, waves slamming the shore in furious crescendos, delaying the armada that waits in concealed anchorages. Thousands of ships, real this time, their hulls groaning against the tide. Eisenhower halts, rubbing his jaw, and turns to his chief of staff, General Walter Bedell Smith, whose eyes are red-rimmed from sleepless nights. Beetle, the weather's a bastard, but if we scrub now, the whole show unravels. Fortitude's holding. Our spies report the Jerry's glued to Calais. Smith nods, the map's pins casting tiny shadows on his furrowed brow, but his voice carries the edge of doubt honed by years of gambles. Patton's playing his part, ranting about delays in Kent like a caged lion. Garbo's last wire bought us another day. Hitler's convinced the blow's postponed, not rerouted. In the corner, meteorologist Group Captain James Stagg huddles over charts, his pipe clenched between teeth, murmuring about a narrow window at dawn tomorrow. The room pulses with tension, the tick of a grandfather clock marking seconds like heartbeats, as the fate of Europe teeters on wind and wave. Far across the channel, in the dimly lit operations room of the 21st Army Group's chateau at La Roche-Guyon, the storm's fury rattles the shutters, rain sluicing down the ancient stone walls like tears of foreboding. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, soaked from an inspection of the Normandy beaches, shrugs off his dripping greatcoat, the fabric slapping wetly against a wooden peg. The air inside is thick with the scent of damp earth and burning logs in the massive fireplace, where flames dance erratically, casting flickering light over maps strewn across a refectory table scarred by centuries of use. Rommel's aide, Captain Helmuth Lang, hands him a towel, his own uniform clinging uncomfortably, while General Hans Speidel pores over a fresh decrypt from Berlin, the paper curling at the edges from the humidity. "Erwin, it's worse than we thought," Speidel says, his voice a low rumble over the fire's crackle, sliding the message across the table. Von Rohner's final assessment. Fusag's traffic patterns scream fabrication, repetitive codes, ghost echoes from dummy transmitters. He's urging full redeployment. Panzer groups to the Cotentin, not Calais. Jodel's endorsed it privately, but Keitel's spiked the cable to the Führer. Rommel dries his face, water dripping from his close-cropped hair, and leans over the map, his finger tracing the undefended stretches of Utah and Omaha beaches. The ink lines blur slightly in the wavering light, mirroring the haze in his mind. "Hans, I've begged for it. Yesterday at Berchtesgaden, I laid out the recon photos. Empty fields in Kent, real gliders stacking in the west. Hitler just stared, then raved about his instinct for the enemy's soul. The 15th Army sits idle, our best divisions chasing shadows." Flash back to that tense drive the day before. Rommel's Horch staff car slicing through pelting rain on the Autobahn toward the Bavarian Alps. Wipers slapping rhythmically, the engine's growl underscoring Lang's grim updates from the radio. At the Berghof, Hitler's mountain retreat, the air was cooler, laced with the alpine freshness seeping through pine-framed windows, but the conference chamber felt suffocating under the weight of tapestries and the Führer's unyielding presence. Adolf Hitler, seated at the head of a long table laden with crystal decanters and silver platters of cold cuts, listened as Rommel unrolled his dossier, the leather creaking softly. Generals Heinz Guderian and Leo Geyer von Schweppenberg flanked him, their panzer expertise a silent plea for mobility, the room's Persian rugs muffling their shifting feet. "Mein Führer, the warnings can't be ignored any longer," Rommel had pressed, his voice steady despite the knot in his gut, spreading out Luftwaffe mosaics, blurry but damning, showing inflatable decoys deflating under cloud cover, supply convoys that looped endlessly without progress. Our agents' tales of Fusag, Patton's divisions, the landing craft armadas, don't match the skies. Recon flights report unusual calm in the west, paratroop silhouettes over the Cherbourg Peninsula, not Dover. If we don't shift the reserves now, Normandy becomes a slaughter pen. Guderian nodded subtly, his monocle catching the chandelier's gleam, adding, "The panzers need freedom. Counterattack within hours, not days, chained to fixed lines." Hitler rose slowly, his shadow stretching long across the table, the decanters tinkling as he gestured sharply. His eyes, bloodshot from amphetamines and obsession, fixed on Rommel with a mix of affection and menace. "Erwin, my desert fox, you see enemies in every mirage, but I know the Allies, their greed for the direct strike. Garbo's network is ironclad. He's infiltrated Eisenhower's tent. Fusag is the storm, gathering force despite this cursed weather. Normandy, harassing feints, nothing more. We'll bleed them at Calais, where the channel's narrowest, the kill zone ours. The words echoed off the wood-panelled walls. Keitel murmuring agreement from the sidelines, his face a mask of feigned conviction. In the hallway after, amid the echo of retreating footsteps and the faint scent of edelweiss from a vase, Guderian had pulled Rommel aside, his whisper harsh over the patter of rain on the terrace. Heinrich's right. The intel's rotten. But pushing harder invites the Gestapo's knock. Von Renner's reports pile up, yet he dismisses them as British tricks to sow discord. Back in the chateau, as thunder rolls like approaching artillery, Rommel slumps into a chair, the leather sighing under him. Speidel pours brandy from a crystal decanter, the amber liquid glugging into glasses that clink like final toasts. We've telegraphed Rundstedt, another joint appeal. Deception scale unprecedented, enemy true intent westward. Authorize panzer movement at division command level. Rommel sips, the burn steadying his nerves, and stares into the fire, where embers pop like distant gunfire. It'll join the graveyard of ignored cables. Hitler's built an empire on his hunches. Now they're our noose. If the invasion hits here... He trails off, the storm's howl filling the void, gulls' cries piercing the gale outside. In Berlin's OKW bunker, buried under the Tiergarten's sodden green, the air is stale with recirculated heat and the oily tang of teleprinters chattering non-stop. General Alfred Jodl, his uniform jacket unbuttoned in rare concession to the late hour, reviews the latest flood of warnings in his cramped office, walls lined with filing cabinets that loom like sentinels. The lamp's bulb buzzes faintly, illuminating stacks of papers, von Renner's graphs plotting fake signal spikes, Rommel's pleas for autonomy, even a dissenting note from Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring, scribbled on Reich Eagle stationery about sparse air activity over Normandy. Jodel's deputy, Major I.G. Hans-Georg Schmidt, enters with a steaming pot of ersatz coffee, the aroma bitter and thin. Herr General, the Führer's en route back to Rastenburg, storms grounding his Ju-52. Shall we hold the briefs? Jodl rubs his eyes, the weight of complicity pressing like the bunker's ceiling. No. Route them through Keitel first. Tell him von Roenner swears it's a masterstroke. Double agents herding us blind, real forces slipping through the west under weather's cloak. Schmidt nods, but lingers, his voice dropping. Rundstedt's furious, called it from Paris. Calais obsession leaves the flank exposed. If Fusag's vapor, we've wasted months. Jodl waves him off, but the doubt festers, a quiet rebellion in his chest. He's drafted his own memo, words forged in the forge of desperation. Cumulative evidence points to diversion. Recommend 12th SS Panzer redeploy to Caen sector immediately. Yet, as he seals it, the teleprinter spits out Hitler's response to the prior appeal, curt, unyielding, hold positions, intuition confirms Calais thrust. Erdős at the Wolf's Lair, as midnight tolls through the dripping woods, Hitler arrives in a convoy of black Mercedes, tires churning mud, the guards' flashlights slicing the downpour like knives. In the warm glow of his private study, lined with books he rarely reads and a globe scarred by conquests, he pores over Garbo's latest, fabricated panic over the storm's delay, promises of a massive follow-up at Pas de Calais. The fire roars, casting his face in ruddy light as an aide delivers Jodl's memo. He scans it, crumples it with a snort. More defeatist whispers. The fake armies are real enough to tie their hands. Mine stay vigilant where it counts. Outside, lightning cracks, illuminating the pines like skeletal fingers. The general's final warnings lost to the tempest's roar. D-Day dawns unseen, the noose drawn taut. June 6, 1944. The first pale light of a clearing dawn creeps over the Normandy horizon. painting the choppy waters of the English Channel in hues of steel grey and reluctant gold. You can taste the salt spray on your lips as the Armada surges forward, over 5,000 vessels slicing through the residual swells from last night's storm, their hulls groaning under the weight of 156,000 troops crammed shoulder to shoulder in landing craft that buck like wild horses. The air thrums with the low growl of Liberty ship engines and the sharp tang of diesel exhaust mingling with seasickness and fear sweat. Private First Class Tommy Ellis, a lanky farm boy from Iowa clutching his M1 Garand, peers over the gunwale of LCVP-27, his knuckles white on the rail as Omaha Beach looms closer, its cliffs shrouded in morning mist like silent sentinels. Aboard the USS Augusta, flagship of Task Force Omaha, Admiral Alan Kirk stands on the bridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes, the wind whipping his scarf as shells from the battleship's 8-inch guns arc overhead with thunderous whooshes, slamming into German bunkers along the shore. The explosions bloom like fiery flowers, shaking the deck and sending vibrations up through your boots. Kirk turns to Captain Edward MacDonald, his voice cutting through the din of orders barked over the intercom. The barrage is on target. H-hour in 5. Signal the Rangers, scale those bluffs or we're done. Below decks, Rangers in their wool sweaters and steel helmets brace against the bulkheads, the metallic clank of their Bangalore torpedoes echoing as they ready for the bloodbath ahead. Across the channel, in the concrete bowels of a command post near Bayeux, the first tremors of the assault ripple through the earth like the devil's heartbeat. Oberleutnant Fritz Bayer, his face pale under the helmet's shadow, jolts awake at his radio console, the static crackling to life with frantic Luftwaffe spotter reports. Flugzeuge, Hunderte, paratroopers over the Orne. The room erupts in chaos, operators twisting dials on few G16 sets, the air thick with the ozone burn of overheating valves and the sour reek of unwashed bodies crammed in for the night watch. Bayer grabs the field phone, its cord snaking across the damp floor, and shouts into it, "To the 21st Panzer, alert! Invasion at Sword and Juno, multiple beaches." But the line hisses back static. Orders from higher up chain the units to their posts. Hitler's decree holding the 15th Army fast at Calais like an iron clamp. At La Roche-Guyon, the chateau's clock tower chimes 6, as Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stirs in his quarters, the silk sheets tangled from fitful sleep, haunted by visions of undefended sands. He swings his legs over the bed's edge, bare feet meeting the cool parquet floor, and pulls on his tunic, the fabric stiff with starch. The air carries the faint aroma of fresh-baked pain au chocolat from the kitchens below, a fleeting normalcy shattered by the urgent rap at his door. Captain Helmuth Lang bursts in, uniform askew, clutching a decoded flimsy that trembles in his grip. Herr Feldmarschall, invasion, paratroops dropped inland, naval guns pounding Utah and gold. It's Normandy, not a feint, the real thrust. Rommel snatches the paper, his eyes scanning the typed lines amid the morning light filtering through lace curtains. Airborne divisions securing bridges at Pegasus, gliders crashing into hedgerows like felled trees. Rommel's face hardens, the scar on his cheek whitening as he buckles his Sam Brown belt, the leather creaking. Verdammt! Calais was the lure. Get Speidel, rouse the panzers. I'll take the command car to the front. They race down the spiral staircase, boots echoing off stone walls adorned with faded tapestries, bursting into the map room where General Hans Speidel already huddles with staff officers around the refectory table. Lamps flicker over charts now alive with red grease pencil marks. Assault waves hitting 5 beaches, the 352nd Infantry Division caught flat-footed at Omaha, their MG-42 nests shredded by naval fire. Speidel's voice is gravelly over the clatter of a teletype spitting updates. The 12th SS is mobilizing, but Hitler's asleep at Rastenburg, Keitel's dithering on release orders. Our warnings, they were spot on and ignored. Word rockets eastward on crackling Enigma lines, piercing the Wolf's Lair's subterranean hush. In the signal center, buried under East Prussian pines where dew clings to needles outside the ventilation shafts, Major Rudolf Hessler, unrelated to the deputy Führer, jerks upright at his desk, the wooden chair scraping as alarms wail. The room smells of heated solder from jury-rigged receivers, green-shaded lamps casting eerie glows on sweating faces. Invasion confirmed. Normandy coast, 0600 hours. He bellows into the intercom, his hand slamming the alert button. Couriers sprint through corridors lit by bare bulbs, boots pounding concrete slick with condensation, delivering the bombshell to Adolf Hitler's bedroom bunker. Hitler, roused at last by the frantic pounding, sits up in his narrow bed, the wool blanket pooling at his waist, his nightshirt damp with night sweats. The air is stuffy, laced with the faint medicinal tang of his bedside tray, pills scattered like confetti from Dr. Morell's regimen. Martin Bormann, his secretary, bursts in first, face ashen under the harsh overhead light, followed by General Wilhelm Keitel, who salutes stiffly, his marshal's baton trembling slightly. Mein Führer, D-Day has begun. Allied forces landing in force at Normandy, paratroopers, armor, the works. Rommel reports chaos. The Atlantic walls breached at 3 points. Hitler blinks, his mustache quivering as he swings his legs out, slippers slapping the rug. He grabs his robe, the silk whispering, and shuffles to the map alcove, where a night shift aide illuminates the channel with a flashlight beam. The Führer's eyes widen, tracing the pins now clustered west of the Seine, not the Pas-de-Calais strongholds he'd fortified to the teeth. Normandy? But Fusag, Patton, Calais! His voice rises to a rasp, fists clenching the robe's lapels. Keitel shifts, the floor creaking under his polished boots, and stammers, "The intelligence." Garbo's reports indicated delay, a follow-on at Calais. Von Roena warned of deception, Fusag, a phantom army. But you dismissed it as Allied trickery. Hitler whirls, face contorting in fury, the lamplight carving deep shadows. Lies! The general's defeatism, Rommel's doubts, Jodel's memos. They poisoned the well. Where's the 15th Army? Still chasing ghosts because of your hesitations. In the adjacent conference room, as aides scramble to lay out situation maps amid the clink of coffee urns and the scratch of pencils, Field Marshal Alfred Jodl arrives by radio patch, his voice tinny over the speaker. The panzers are releasing now, mein Führer, but delayed by hours. The fake armies tied our hands, reserves poured east on bad intel. Normandy's beaches are blooded, but holding for now. Hitler paces, his slippers shuffling erratically, the room's pine-paneled walls seeming to close in. Outside, the forest stirs with the first birdsong, oblivious to the empire's unraveling. He mutters to Bormann, "They warned me, but I trusted the signs." Intuition failed. Yet even in rage, doubt lingers, a seed of realization that the Allies' grand illusion, swallowed whole, has cracked the Reich's spine. By midday, as P-51 Mustangs streak overhead in Normandy's skies, their Merlin engines roaring like avenging angels, Rommel's command car races along bomb-pocked roads toward Caen, dust and smoke choking the air. He grips the dashboard, the leather worn smooth, watching Tiger tanks rumble into position too late, their 80mm guns swiveling futilely. The fake armies, once Hitler's bulwark, now mock him from across the water, canvas ghosts that bought the Allies their foothold. In London, at Schaeff, Eisenhower exhales smoke from his cigarette, the war room electric with victory's first spark. The warnings ignored, the trust betrayed, the deception's triumph seals the West's liberation, one beachhead at a time.